Thanks for tuning in. Next section of the Modern Day book by Reverend Susan MeeLing. That's me. Starting on the last part of page 72. Or technically on 72. Apparently, maybe the guy who killed Osama bin Laden, that former Navy SEAL guy, he might actually be from the state of Montana. Chairman, for you messing with my Medal of Honor art project, that guy probably would know the time it's supposed to take to get from Columbia Falls, but specifically Kalispell, to the two towns before Arlene, Montana. Just saying. But just before taking the first group of my Medal of Honor art project by me, Reverend Susan MeeLing, pieces into McClendon hardware, I had sent a Facebook message online outward to ask for help in reference of finding a Medal of Honor recipient named Bud Hawk in the Bremerton region. Online, I could not find the information, and Mike Hershey and I had messages online, and we set up a time to get together to meet. He took his truck as I drove my car to the various locations of several other Medal of Honor recipients, including a location in Restal, where on my website you can find the information in reference to that, and what he had done to restore John Nibby's marker, and grinned when I told him I had already completed that particular Medal of Honor artwork piece. He and I discussed the grave of the unknown soldier in that particular cemetery and how that location was the only area he had seen rhododendron plants that bloomed twice, but there were not any ever blooming rhododendron plant species at that point in time. Mike Hershey had showed me, as we discussed, certain chemical compounds which would enhance the stonework, while also discussing the finishing to continue to keep the purity of. And when I asked if the compound eats away the different aspects of the porous stone, he asked me why I would ask that question. When I said I was just wondering, as I didn't know if a stone that is extremely porous, as that particular one looked to be, what the long term would be down the line. And Mike Hershey had said he would have to look into that because it wasn't something he had thought about before. Afterwards, Mike Hershey and I, had gone to the Bremerton Naval Shipyard and discussed a few aspects in reference to the Medal of Honor recipient Bud Hawk and his daughter, how he was awarded it, and it was quite interesting and amazing to listen to. Then we discussed a little bit about scuba diving, because Mike Hershey apparently was at one point in time in the Navy for the United States of America. And I told him a little bit about my scuba diving and how I had the different training that I had, as well as the scuba dive at the Vandenberg when I landed at the bottom of the ocean next to the Vandenberg, and scuba diving there. After discussing the injury I had during the Palm Sunday 2000 head injury and the after effects, though Mike Hershey seemed a little concerned about a few different individuals who went by on bicycles, and skateboards. He wanted to show me a military museum in the Bremerton area, but it was closed at the time. And he said that the ceremony for the Medal of Honor recipient Bud Hawk had been short, but it meant a lot to him and his daughter. As I listened to the story, we also discussed a few other things. Within the time of taking the artwork to McClendon's Hardware on Pearl Street, I knew how the casings had to be. I was introduced to Tom Durham, who was extremely nice, male, who also was in the Navy for the United States of America's Armed Forces. And the way I wanted it done was unfinished wood, so that way, depending on where the Medal of Honor recipient artwork would go, it could fit into any location. So if it had unfinished wood, it would be able to blend into the unfinished wood interior. If it had dark wood, it would easily be able to be stained and stuff like that. And then encased in glass and could be hung on the wall either side. And then he asked, meaning Tom Durham had asked a few different aspects in reference to my Medal of Honor art project, and I told him about it. And then once encased in glass, the art could be hung on the wall either side, or a light could be shown through from one side for it to shadow through to the other, or depending on where it was hung, like if it was a centerpiece, then you could walk around it and it would be a different art piece each time, but still the same Medal of Honor recipient art project. And so those different pieces, when completed, were either taken to the civilian cemetery that the Medal of Honor recipient marker was found at, or it was taken to an American Legion or a disabled American veterans place, or a VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars, or a military museum, so that way it would be able to be given to the family. I was never asked if anybody wanted me to present the pieces, so nobody ever contacted me in reference to that. As I told my friend and my hairstylist, and when writing this, wouldn't it be funny if the reason sometimes it took a while for me to get the finished pieces of my Medal of Honor art project back when I was in Washington State was because the Library of Congress, apparently it takes, like in the USS or USNS New Jersey, if you go visit that ship and you sign a signature, and once the wall gets filled up, the Library of Congress takes the wall, makes whatever, something another, and then lacquers it or something. And so I told her, wouldn't it be funny if that's what the reason was, as to it taking so long for me to get the different pieces back? And then she kind of laughed and smiled and then waxed my hair. And as that happened, I thought to myself, it would be funny if I had no idea that they did that. and it was being done. That way they could ensure that I was being respectful. And then, would be able to follow what was going on in the compassionate, honorable, and righteous way, unlike cherubim, but being able to catch the cherubim. I had described certain aspects of the beginning points of my Medal of Honor art project in Washington State, and the references of how I came to create my Medal of Honor art project on my website, www.susanmeeling.com, and in person with people, and in email. I emailed that cutie patootie former Navy Marine, former Marine who has probably seen a Navy ship, was what I was trying to say, but cutie patootie Marine nonetheless. He is so cute. So cute. I know there's a whole bunch of former Marines out there, but there's this one cutie patootie former Marine that I had a dream about years ago. But so cute. Oh, he's so cute. And Um, just he's so cute. I don't care how, whatever. And I have a thing for Marines, especially the dress blues. And I bet he looks good in those. I'm just saying, they, um, ooh, ooh. Former Marine, it's a little warm. He's so cute. Oh, he's just, just saying, like, focus. So cute. Oh. I have a thing for Marines. I'm just saying, and I would, what I would, and so, though I had described certain aspects from, I already read that, in reference to going beyond the city of Seattle and the areas nearby when going to further points of Western Washington, I had several instances of which were problematic in certain regards, just as certain aspects of which Eastern Washington had certain points of interest. Regarding Western Washington, there had been a location near the Grays Harbor area, of which one could see the Satsop nuclear power plant towers in the distance behind the trees on the mountains, near the location for the Medal of Honor recipient of Edward Sheehan. Couldn't find the directory when I first showed up, but I found it after the little yellow chain, and I went back and forth when looking for that Medal of Honor recipient, and then when I saw the little yellow chain, I was like, oh, look, there's a little building behind there, and I went to look, and then I heard a branch snap, and I was like, so I don't know what you do, I don't need to know. I'm going to go find, and then I found the directory, and I found Edward Sheehan, and took care of that Medal of Honor recipient. I was gone, but there was a female in that recipient when I first showed up, and it's like, ugh, ew. And it looked like the same female who is in the Portland GAR cemetery. And I'm just going to say, for people who don't believe in certain things, I'm just going to throw this out there. I already wrote about it. I did not feel comfortable going into that cemetery at the GAR in Portland. If I don't feel comfortable going into a cemetery, I got excited and still get excited about my Medal of Honor art project, which requires me to go to cemeteries to do the rubbing for the marker. And I'm just saying, if I'm not willing to go into a cemetery, that lets you know. There's some shit up in there. I was not willing to go into that one. And so when in Clayella, later on, there were people who were walking in the parking lot area who looked similar to the red Hyundai people when I was in Montana, and that traffic issue. And then there was a female at the Hosmer Crossroads Tacoma Hotel in 2014 before getting the rental house that looked like the female who I spoke with at the Denny's in Spokane, who said that she was Grand Staff's daughter in that Denny's, which was about 5 to 10 minutes away from the Econo Lodge Hotel that I had gotten a room at. The housekeeper kind of looked like my ex-sister-in-law, Mary Evangelina Nichols Osteen from Georgia, where there was a couple in a red Hyundai who was pulling into the parking lot when I was leaving the hotel room to go to meet with the female at the Denny's. And while there, the female at the Denny's location who claimed to have been Grand Staff's daughter said that her friend was Mann's daughter from that Medal of Honor recipient, and they had picked up those Medal of Honor art pieces, or she was picking up those Medal of Honor art pieces. In reference to the stolen valor in regards to my Medal of Honor art project, the family recipient members, as well as the Medal of Honor recipients themselves, if there are no laws thus far for stolen valor, for example, my now ex-boyfriend Jesse Leroy Hoover Jr., who apparently did not graduate Air Force officer training, because apparently Air Force officer training does not occur at Lackland Air Force Base. Since there's like a law that you can't impersonate a police officer, I don't understand why there's not a law that is enacted to prevent stolen valor. So if in reference to like impersonation of a law enforcement officer is 3 to 5 years, and this, if not, is a recommendation, 3 to 5 years minimum in jail or prison, depending upon the level of offense. Using a badge of identification with the uniform for the military aspect in a military prison for such. Damages involved, then a minimum sentence of 5 years if in a military uniform. Also, adding a mandatory of 500 volunteer hours to the community service for the minimal offenses after being released from prison or jail, and that includes firefighters and veterans of the different branches of the United States of America's Armed Forces, law enforcement, different branches and such. If in reference to the different branches of the armed forces, whether the United States of America's Army, Air Force, Coast Guard, Marine Corps, or Navy should be an elevated aspect in regards to the different levels of, so if impersonating an enlisted soldier, the 3 to 5 minimum prison, 5 to 7 years for warrant officer, and 7 to 10 years for an officer, and then for the officer, the stolen valor in that regard, as well as those who assisted to that knowingly. A minimum of 1,000 hours of volunteer service after being released from prison is a recommendation. The impersonation of a special forces operator of any of the branches or divisions of law enforcement and or military for whatever city or state and or the United States of America's Armed Forces, a minimum of a 15-year per offense and a minimum of 2,000 hours of volunteer community service after being released. However, in regard to special forces impersonation, my recommendation is in a military prison and not a civilian prison. In reference to the misrepresentation of the special forces in regards to stolen valor, if that's the case hypothetically for some of those cherubim, depending on the amount of offenses and how many and who was involved, increasing that to 20 years because of the specialty training, and that includes the impersonation of FBI and or CIA, private security and stuff like that, if not actually an officer of. In reference to those who would impersonate family members, and in turn stolen valor. For example, my dead ex-husband and his two sisters perpetuating the lie, knowing that the Chief Warrant Officer 3 had explained to them, as well as I had explained to them after speaking with the Chief Warrant Officer 3, and that includes my biological mother and biological sister, as well as Cactus Jack, aka Jeffrey Crickendall Jr., because of the picture that my dead ex-husband took when he was alive, with stolen valor on it. I didn't know. I only know two ribbons. I know the rainbow ribbon, which is when you graduate basic training, and I know the Medal of Honor ribbon. I don't know what the other ribbons are. And he had complained that during Halloween, he was mad because somebody yelled at him about his dress blue uniform. And I said, well, yeah, your dress blues are fucking wrinkled, so duh, I could see why they would yell at you for that. And then apparently he said that he was mad because he got yelled at for not having his fruit, well, his it wasn't his words, my words are fruit salad, for the different ribbons. And then he was mad at me because I didn't defend him for somebody yelling at him about the ribbons of his fruit salad not being correct. And I was just kind of like, well, I don't know any ribbons except for the rainbow ribbon and the Medal of Honor ribbon. That's it. So, other people, you're in San Antonio, Texas. How many veterans, active duty, National Guard, and reservists are in the city of San Antonio and in the state of Texas? It doesn't take a head injury to figure out. This is like the location. You just don't, you don't do it at all, like, if you're a decent human being. But if you choose to do it, probably shouldn't do it in the state of Texas, especially in the city of San Antonio. I don't think it takes a head injury to figure out there being 5 military bases in one city. That's kind of, stupid. And I went from college algebra with trigonometry and calculus to second grade math. I know stupid. I can see myself. See, I can see myself. But that's just pretty stupid to steal valor, period, in this era. Well, I wouldn't know how to verify certain things. There are plenty of people that I would guesstimate would know how to verify that. And so, my recommendation for people who knowingly continue to lie about being related to somebody, thus stealing their family's valor for, in reference to the Medal of Honor recipients, as well as my ex-in-laws, such as Susie, legal name Susan, Marie Nichols Lopez, which the San Antonio Express News did speak with her, as well as myself, but they spoke with her, and then they, made it come across as though I was cheating on Robert, and I wasn't. He was the one who cheated on me for years. That's why we were separated. He lived in his own apartment before he went back active duty. And I'm just going to throw this out there in reference to the San Antonio Express News. They could have, known that and put it correctly, because I was separated from him well before he went back active duty. And they should fix that, I'm just saying. Because I did not cheat on my dead ex-husband when he was alive, ever. He was the one who cheated on me repeatedly, before the first separation and before the final separation. Just saying. Anyway, that type of thing in reference to my ex-sisters-in-law. 10 years of imprisonment is the recommendation, along with if that female who claimed to be Grandstaff's daughter was not Grandstaff's daughter, minimum of 10 years imprisonment in a military prison for each offense, and a minimum of 1,700 volunteer hours of community service after their release. And then, in reference to defrauding an artist, for example, Susie Marie Nichols Lopez, repaying the worth of the artwork and the time of, even if it was donated for what a modern artist is paid for a commission to do, to be repaid to that artist, because so Susie Marie Nichols Lopez told me that artist, ironically from Carrollton, who did the artwork that apparently had a ceremony in Arizona or something, where she took my car because I let her use it because she wanted to, or van, it was a Kia white Sedona van. She wanted to take everybody, and if she lied, because she complained about he wouldn't do the dress blue picture, instead only would do the camouflage picture, so I don't think it takes a headhunter to figure out that guy probably knows the ribbons. But anyway, also in regards to someone like John Vidial, on FetLife he goes by Celtic Cowboy, at least when I knew him in 2009 and 2010 and 2011 and 2012. He had worn a Special Forces shirt or a infantry shirt, and giving a bad name for the Rangers, because he didn't serve in the Rangers. And being attached to a Ranger battalion is extremely different than actually being a Ranger. And, wearing a Ranger tab t-shirt, in my opinion, while acknowledging being in the Army of the United States of America and that being known, that I think is something that should be able to be punishable, because that in its own way, I think, is a way that some would consider the equivalent of stolen valor. And, someone could say they wear it in support of in the picture, like on the underneath, quotation part. But if not, and just stating, that sounds like and comes across as stolen valor to me. My opinion. Then in reference to falsifying documentation, I am sure there has to be a law on that, but if there isn't, a recommendation of 7 years per offense in a military prison. See how I have this thing about military prisons and military stuff? And then, in reference to my ex-sister-in-law, Mary Evangelina Nichols Osteen, which she did, I'm guesstimating she stole my military ID because of the way she had acted during that time at Lackland Air Force Base in 2000. If she had used my military ID to either keep track of me and or to steal my identity the way her sister Susie Marie Nichols Lopez had stolen her children's identity, to the point where Brianna Marie Lopez could not go to college because she couldn't get financial aid because of what Susie Marie Nichols Lopez did to her credit. Recommendation on that, 7 years per offense, and a minimum of 1,700 hours of volunteer service after being released. And the reason why I recommend for military prison is in reference to the overpopulation of civilian prisons, as well as the fact of, in the references of hypothetically, to steal valor should be met with what they stole valor from, and that would mean if they stole valor from the military, then they go to a military prison, in my opinion. If they stole valor from law enforcement, then, a civilian prison makes sense, but stealing from the military, as far as valor is concerned, I think should be met with stealing, that being punishable by going to a military prison. In reference to stealing privileges and using someone's identification to get the privileges without actually having served themselves, then, that's similar. 1 year of imprisonment, 500 hours of volunteer service if they did that, or if they had convinced somebody to do it who didn't know any better, then, again, that's a year of imprisonment and 500 hours of volunteer service after being released from prison for those offenses as a recommendation. And then, like, my ex-sister-in-law, Susie Marie Nichols Lopez, purchased stolen goods knowingly from Home Depot and Lowe's to return for store credit. And then her mom, Grandma Nichols, had purchased the gift cards, or she was given the gift cards, either way, and then remodeled her house in Fort Worth on Dorsey Street. I'm sure that that's probably illegal, but if it's not, the recommendation for that would be repaying the store credit times 2 plus interest for each year, and then 5 years of imprisonment plus 700 hours of volunteer service as a recommendation for that. I was convinced, I didn't know that it was stolen property at the time until afterwards, and I didn't even get the benefit of the gift card. And Susie Marie Nichols Lopez had only confessed that after I refused to do it, but she got Sean McCall to do it, and when I had told Sean McCall that I didn't feel comfortable doing it, and then after he had done it is when she had told me that it was stolen property, and it was like, oh, definitely not going to do that now. I didn't even know that that was like a thing. And so, in recommendation of my Medal of Honor art project, if my artwork was stolen and or presented by someone else claiming to have done the work that I did, the recommendation is 10 years in a military prison for each offense, plus the charges of theft of property, and imprisonment and fines thereof. And in reference to what I said in regards to the impersonating family members of military. If, in reference, the means through technology website were used to divert away from finding the work that I had done in my Medal of Honor art project, so that way somebody else could take credit for it, I recommend double or triple that. Because I'm the one who did it, and I can show where I signed each individual piece of each Medal of Honor artwork. I know exactly where I signed it. And even though it's not my full signature, it is my initials. And I know where I signed it on the front and the back, on each piece. So, because an artist always signs their artwork. So, I didn't want to use my signature in a big way because I didn't want to detract from the Medal of Honor recipient and what that Medal of Honor recipient did. So I signed it, each and every Medal of Honor artwork piece I did sign, and I signed with my initials. And I know where I signed it. I signed on the commendations as well as signing inside of the paint. And in some, I signed inside of the symbol of the Medal of Honor as well. So, just saying. In reference to those recommendations. Yeah, so when I was in Idaho, I went and tried to find one of the Medal of Honor recipients. The first one was green, which I found immediately, but I kept looking for Schoonover, and after hours of walking around looking for that one Medal of Honor recipient, returning to the car, it was a Mazda hatchback. I had spent hours walking in the direct sunlight, trying to find the Medal of Honor recipient there, similarly to the one in Walla Walla, but Walla Walla, Washington. But in Idaho, wherever Green's Medal of Honor recipient marker is, when looking for Schoonover, and I got back to the car after, I think I walked around that cemetery for like 5 hours trying to find that Medal of Honor recipient. In the shade, the car said the outside temperature was 119 degrees Fahrenheit. It's like, wow. Doesn't really feel like it. It's a little warm, but not that hot. But yeah. I don't know if there's anything in reference to that, but I've given the different recommendations to go off of and kind of build upon in reference to that. And then the irony of 119 degrees Fahrenheit and then like the stuff with the 9/11, that's kind of a little bit weird in certain regards. Kind of like 9/11 being the equivalent of 911 when you look at it. So it's kind of a little bit odd. And then I had called 911 in reference to several locations, one being in Montana the year I went out to Missoula for that at the old post, and I actually got a call back from someone who left a voicemail, and that particular male who called me back, I spoke with him, told him about my Medal of Honor art project, where I was going, where I was staying, all that sort of stuff. And that was the year before the traffic from the red Hyundai. But I told him about that. I'd also called 911 when I was out in Spokane in the silver Honda Civic, finding the Medal of Honor recipient markers, and there were these pictures that I took of some animal that had changed, and I did not feel comfortable getting out of the car because of it really wasn't an animal. It looked like one, but it was what's it called? What's the word? Oh, shapeshifter. That's what that animal was. Because yeah. Anyway, I showed a guy I had met the pictures of that. It was on the Amazon Fire tablet that I was given. Anyway, I called 911 several times for different fires I saw, including in Spokane, Washington, and Idaho that particular year, and then the following year went in Missoula Old Post area. And I called 911 several other places. I sent letters to the different governors trying to remember every single place that I had called 911 to give the heads up for. But I will complete another video in reference to that. So, thanks for tuning in for the reading of the pages of 72 to 86 for the modern day book by Reverend Susan MeeLing. That's me. Subscribe to my channel, please. go to my website, look through the different things that I've done. You can click on the links to purchase all of the books. Please share my channel with others to watch the videos, as well as my website. Look through that and purchase the books from the links. And then there's my journal blog entry, the Ornery PSA. You can see my Medal of Honor artwork, as well as see some of the paintings that I had done. And, you can also click on the donate button. I'd appreciate that. And thank you in advance. You guys have a good one.